When people talk about betrayal, they often imagine it coming from enemies or strangers. But the deepest cuts? Those come from the people closest to you, the ones who know your dreams, your insecurities, your most vulnerable moments. My name is Jamie Chen, and the person who betrayed me wasn't just family. It was my own sister. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Picture this. I'm standing in my parents' kitchen, clutching a glass of wine so tightly I'm surprised it hasn't shattered. Across the room, my sister Olivia is announcing her new sustainable fashion startup to our entire family. The concept? A curated marketplace connecting local designers with eco-conscious consumers, complete with every detail I'd shared with her in confidence just 3 months earlier. As our relatives showered her with praise, she caught my eye across the room and smirked. That smirk said everything. What are you going to do about it? 6 months later, I had my answer. I became the majority shareholder of her company, but that's jumping ahead. Let me take you back to the beginning, to show you how the quiet sister everyone overlooked ended up owning the very business that was stolen from her. Growing up in Portland as the younger Chen sister meant living in a perpetual shadow. Our parents, Robert, a corporate attorney, and Katherine, a marketing executive, were the epitome of success, with expectations to match. While they never explicitly played favorites, the family dynamic made it clear who wore the crown. Olivia was 3 years older, effortlessly charismatic, and seemed genetically engineered for achievement. Valedictorian, Stanford graduate, the golden child who could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one with so much potential that I never quite seemed to fulfill. Where Olivia commanded attention, I observed from the periphery. Where she spoke with authority, I pondered and planned. Jamie's just finding her way, my mother would say with a dismissive wave when relatives asked about my less conventional path. I'd graduated from Oregon State with a degree in sustainable product design, a choice my parents tolerated rather than celebrated. What my family didn't understand was that my quietness wasn't weakness, it was concentration. While everyone focused on Olivia's dramatic declarations of ambition, I was methodically studying the intersection of sustainability and commerce. I spent weekends at farmers markets talking to artisans about their crafts. I volunteered at textile, recycling centers. I built relationships with local designers struggling to reach customers who shared their values. Our childhood bedroom symbolized our differences perfectly. Olivia's half had been plastered with achievement certificates and social media printouts featuring her at glamorous events. My side had mood boards, fabric swatches, and dog-eared business plans. She lived outwardly. I lived inwardly. My passion for sustainable fashion wasn't sudden. It had been growing since high school, when I first learned about the environmental impact of fast fashion. The statistics haunted me. Millions of tons of clothing waste, toxic dyes polluting waterways, exploitative labor practices. I became obsessed with finding better solutions. By the time I turned 26, I had outlined a complete business model for what I called Thread Cycle, a platform connecting eco-conscious consumers with local designers who used sustainable practices. It wasn't just a marketplace, it was an ecosystem that would help small designers scale their production ethically. The platform would include resources about materials, transparent supply chains, and eventually, a subscription service featuring curated, sustainable pieces. I rented a tiny desk at a downtown co-working space, working on Thread Cycle every evening after my day job at a local boutique. My apartment was more storage unit than living space. Stacks of research, fabric samples, and business books occupied every available surface. I lived on instant ramen and determination. The boutique job wasn't glamorous, but it taught me invaluable lessons about retail operations, inventory management, and most importantly, what customers actually wanted versus what they claimed to want. I watched women pick up items, check price tags, and make split-second decisions. I noticed which sustainable pieces sold and which languished on the racks. Every observation fed my business plan. Unlike my sister, I didn't announce my ambitions to the world. I didn't need external validation to keep moving forward. I found a mentor in Eleanor Rivera, the owner of the boutique and a former fashion buyer who had grown disillusioned with the industry's waste. She saw something in me that my family never had: genuine innovation and unwavering commitment. "You're onto something revolutionary, Jamie," Eleanor told me one evening as we closed up shop. "Not because it's flashy, but because it's necessary. The fashion industry needs this reckoning." Those quiet affirmations meant everything. They were like water in a desert, rare and life-sustaining. It was Eleanor who encouraged me to apply for a spot in a local business incubator program. The application required a comprehensive business plan, financial projections, and a proof of concept. I spent weeks refining my pitch, practicing in front of my bathroom mirror until the words flowed naturally. The day I was accepted into the program, I called my parents first, hoping this tangible achievement might finally register. "That's nice, honey," my mother said, distracted. "Oh, did you hear Olivia's been featured in Portland Monthly's 30 Under 30 list? We're having a celebration dinner this Sunday. You'll be there, right?" It was always like this. My milestones were footnotes, Olivia's were headlines. The family dinner that Sunday followed its usual script. My father grilled designer steaks on the back deck of their Lake Oswego home, while my mother fluttered around, perfecting place settings and refreshing drinks. Relatives streamed in, each greeting Olivia with enthusiastic hugs before turning to me with polite smiles. I wasn't bitter, at least I didn't think I was. I had accepted our family's dynamics long ago. I was proud of Olivia in my way, even if her accomplishments always seemed to arrive without the struggle that characterized my journey. That night, as everyone toasted her magazine feature, I decided to share my own news. "I've been accepted into the Cascade Founders Program," I said during a rare lull in conversation. "It's pretty competitive. They only take 8 businesses each cohort." My announcement landed with all the impact of a feather on carpet. A few relatives nodded politely, but conversation quickly flowed back to Olivia's feature. Later, as I helped my mother clear plates, Olivia cornered me in the kitchen. "Cascade Founders, huh? What's this business idea you've never mentioned?" Her tone was light, but her eyes were sharp with interest. Perhaps it was the wine, or maybe it was the rare moment of my sister actually showing interest in my life. But I told her everything. I explained ThreadCycle's mission, the market gap I'd identified, the technology backend I was developing with a programmer from the co-working space. I showed her the prototype website on my phone and the research validating the demand. "This could actually work," she said, sounding genuinely surprised. "The sustainability angle is smart. That market's exploding right now." For one fleeting moment, I felt seen by my sister. It was intoxicating. "I'd love to hear more," she said, squeezing my arm. "Let's do coffee next week." We never had that coffee. Olivia canceled twice, then stopped responding to my texts altogether. I wrote it off as typical Olivia behavior. Intense interest followed by disinterest once the novelty wore off. 3 months passed. The incubator program was transformative, connecting me with mentors, potential investors, and like-minded founders. ThreadCycle was evolving from concept to reality, though progress was slower than I'd hoped. Finding technical talent willing to work for equity was challenging, and my savings were dwindling rapidly. Then came the dinner that changed everything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My mother called on a Tuesday. "Family dinner this Sunday. Olivia has big news, and she specifically asked that you be there." I almost declined. The boutique had begun stocking pieces from local sustainable designers, creating a mini version of my thread cycle concept, and Sundays were our busiest day. But familial obligation won out. The evening began like any other Chen family gathering. Cocktails on the patio, my father's trademark heavy pours, my mother's meticulously arranged appetizer platters. Olivia arrived fashionably late, accompanied by a man I'd never seen before. "Everyone, this is Marcus Williams, my business partner," she announced, gesturing to the tall man beside her. He was impeccably dressed in what I recognized as a Stella McCartney sustainable wool suit, the kind of detail only someone researching ethical fashion would notice. My stomach tightened. Olivia clinked her glass with a butter knife, commanding the room's attention in that effortless way she'd perfected since childhood. "I've been keeping something under wraps for a few months, but today I can finally share some exciting news," she began, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone who knows they hold the room. "Marcus and I have secured seed funding for our sustainable fashion startup, Green Thread." The room erupted in congratulations while I froze, glass halfway to my lips. Green Thread will connect eco-conscious consumers with vetted sustainable designers through an intuitive platform that makes ethical shopping seamless, she continued, reciting almost verbatim the elevator pitch I'd crafted during sleepless nights at my cramped desk. As she outlined features identical to ThreadCycle's roadmap, from the subscription box service to the transparent supply chain verification, I felt the blood drain from my face. She wasn't just borrowing concepts, she had stolen my entire business model. Our relatives mobbed her with questions and praise. My father was already discussing introductions to potential investors. My mother beamed with pride, already envisioning the magazine features and television appearances. I sat silent, my mind racing between shock, betrayal, and a sinking realization. Olivia had connections I didn't. With her network and my idea, she could execute in months what might take me years. When the initial excitement waned, my Aunt Julie turned to me. "Jamie, isn't this similar to what you were working on?" A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned to me. Before I could respond, Olivia laughed lightly. "Jamie mentioned having some interest in sustainable fashion, but Green Thread is operating at a completely different level. We've already secured partnerships with designers in 5 cities and have a wait list of investors." She turned to me, her smile never reaching her eyes. "But hey, maybe when we're hiring for the retail team, you could bring your boutique experience." The condescension in her voice was unmistakable. This wasn't just about stealing my business idea. It was about putting me in my place. I felt my cheeks burn as relatives awkwardly returned to their conversations. My mother, sensing tension, quickly redirected attention to the main course. As everyone migrated to the dining room, Olivia brushed past me. "It's not personal," she whispered. "It's business. My execution will be better anyway. You know that." In that moment, standing alone in my parents' living room, I faced a choice. I could confront Olivia publicly, creating a scene that would only reinforce the family narrative of me as the emotional, unstable sister. I could break down, retreat, abandon my dream now that Olivia had claimed it as her own. Or I could choose a third path. I took a deep breath, fixed my face into a neutral expression, and joined my family at the table. Throughout dinner, I said, "Little." I smiled politely as Olivia detailed Green Thread's launch timeline. I nodded as Marcus explained their competitive advantage. I even raised my glass when my father proposed a toast to their success. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. The hurt was there, a physical ache behind my ribs. But alongside it was something new, a cold, clear certainty. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. As I drove back to my apartment that night, replaying every moment of the evening, one thought crystallized. If Olivia wanted to make this business, she would learn exactly who she was dealing with. The quiet sister everyone overlooked had been taking notes all along, about the industry, about business strategy, and most importantly, about Olivia herself. She thought she'd won before the game had even begun. But Olivia had made a critical error. She had mistaken my quietness for weakness. She had stolen my idea, but overlooked the mind that created it. By the time I reached my apartment, the initial shock had hardened into resolve. I pulled out my laptop and began typing a new business plan, one that would build on everything I'd learned, but push far beyond the original concept. ThreadCycle wasn't dead. It was evolving into something Olivia couldn't possibly anticipate. As I worked through the night, fueled by a strange cocktail of betrayal and determination, I realized something that almost made me laugh aloud. My sister had just handed me the most valuable gift possible: absolute freedom from caring about her opinion. For the first time in my life, I wasn't working in Olivia's shadow or seeking my family's approval. I was working solely for myself, with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Dawn broke over Portland's skyline as I finally closed my laptop. The hurt hadn't disappeared. It would take more than one night of planning to heal that wound. But alongside it now was something I'd never fully experienced before: the quiet, unshakable confidence that comes from knowing exactly what you're capable of. Olivia thought she'd reduced me to a spectator in my own story. She was about to discover just how wrong she was. The next morning, I woke up with purpose coursing through my veins. The apartment I'd once seen as depressingly small now felt like a war room, a place where I could strategize without prying eyes. The pain of Olivia's betrayal hadn't disappeared overnight, but it had transformed into something useful: fuel. I called Eleanor first thing, asking if I could come in early before the boutique opened. When I arrived, her face immediately registered concern. "You look like you haven't slept," she said, sliding a coffee across the counter. "What happened?" I told her everything: the dinner, Olivia's announcement, the stolen concept, right down to her patronizing whisper about execution. Eleanor listened without interruption, her expression darkening. "That's beyond unfair," she said when I finished. "It's unethical. Have you considered legal action?" I shook my head. I never formally copyrighted the business plan or trademarked the name. Besides, she changed just enough details to make it legally distinct. "So what's your next move?" That was Eleanor, always assuming I would fight back rather than surrender. It was one of the countless reasons I valued her mentorship. "I'm going to build something better," I said, surprised by the conviction in my voice. "GreenThread is essentially ThreadCycle 1.0. I've spent the night conceptualizing ThreadCycle 2.0. I spread my notes across the counter. Where ThreadCycle had focused on connecting consumers with sustainable designers, the new concept extended backward into the supply chain. It wasn't just about selling eco-friendly clothes, but transforming how they were made. The original model was a marketplace, I explained. This is an ecosystem. Eleanor studied my scribbled diagrams. "You're talking about vertical integration." Exactly. GreenThread is just a fancy storefront. But what if we owned part of the production process? What if we created a platform that helped designers source truly sustainable materials, connected them with ethical manufacturers, provided quality control, and then brought the finished products to market? My hands moved animatedly as I explained. Every sustainable fashion startup faces the same problem: reliable manufacturing at scale that actually maintains ethical standards. They either stay small and expensive, or they compromise their values as they grow. I want to solve that fundamental challenge. Eleanor nodded slowly, her eyes lighting up with understanding. "You're not just selling products, you're fixing the broken system that produces them." "Yes, and here's the thing. It's a much harder business to build, but once established, it's nearly impossible to replicate quickly. Olivia can copy a website and a business model, but she can't instantly create manufacturing relationships and supply chain expertise." Eleanor took a sip of her coffee, studying me over the rim of her mug. This is brilliant, Jamie, but it's also significantly more capital intensive. You'll need serious investment. My momentum faltered. I know, that's the roadblock. Not necessarily, Eleanor said, setting down her cup with purpose. The Northwest Sustainable Business Summit is next month in Seattle. Thomas Harrington will be speaking. He's been investing heavily in ethical supply chain solutions. I can introduce you. The name sent a ripple of nervousness through me. Thomas Harrington was something of a legend in sustainable business circles, an early tech investor who'd pivoted his considerable fortune toward environmental ventures. Getting in front of him seemed impossible. How do you know Thomas Harrington? I asked, incredulous. Eleanor smiled enigmatically. I wasn't always a boutique owner. I ran sourcing for Nordstrom for 15 years. The retail world is smaller than you think. For the first time since Olivia's announcement, I felt a flicker of genuine hope, but it was quickly tempered by reality. I'd need a much more developed business plan. Financial models, market analysis, everything. Then that's your priority for the next month, Eleanor said firmly. The boutique can manage without you for a few weeks. Take unpaid leave if you need to focus. I stared at her, overwhelmed by the generosity of the offer. I can't afford to lose the income. Consider it my investment in your future, she replied. Sometimes you need to leap without a safety net, Jamie. This is your moment. The next 4 weeks passed in a sleepless blur. I withdrew from the Zai world entirely, turning my apartment into a command center for Operation Thread Cycle 2.0. Every surface disappeared under research materials, market analyses, and financial projections. My social media accounts went dark. I stopped attending family dinners, deflecting my mother's increasingly concerned texts with vague excuses about work commitments. The only people I saw were Eleanor and Devin, a programmer friend from the co-working space who agreed to help develop a technical proof of concept in exchange for future equity. We worked around the clock, fueled by caffeine and shared indignation at Olivia's theft. Meanwhile, Green Thread launched to considerable local fanfare. The Portland Business Journal ran a feature on visionary sibling entrepreneurs, Olivia Chen and Marcus Williams. My parents texted me the article, apparently oblivious to the knife it twisted in my heart. I archived the message without responding. I could have spiraled into bitterness. Instead, I channeled everything into preparation. I studied Harrington's investment portfolio, analyzing the common threads in businesses he backed. I built financial models so thorough they accounted for contingencies I hoped never to face. I practiced my pitch until Devin threatened to move out if he heard it one more time. A week before the summit, Eleanor helped me invest in a proper business wardrobe. Nothing flashy, but polished enough to communicate seriousness of purpose. We settled on a charcoal blazer over a simple silk shell with sustainably produced wool trousers and low heels I could comfortably stand in all day. No fast fashion for the sustainable fashion entrepreneur, Eleanor joked as she helped me choose fabrics that would communicate my values without saying a word. The night before we departed for Seattle, I received a text from Olivia. It was the first direct communication since the dinner. Heard you're going to the Northwest Summit. Funny coincidence. So are we. Green Thread has been invited to participate in the Emerging Innovators Showcase. Maybe you can stop by our booth. The message carried its own subtext. I was attending as an anonymous spectator, while she was being featured as a rising star. I deleted the text without responding, but my hands shook as I finished packing. The Washington State Convention Center was intimidating in its scale and grandeur. Thousands of attendees from across the sustainable business spectrum milled through the vast halls. Speaker sessions ran concurrently in different rooms, while the exhibition floor buzzed with activity. I clutched my attendee badge like a talisman, fighting the sensation that I didn't belong. Eleanor navigated the chaos with practiced ease, greeting former colleagues and making introductions that left my head spinning. We strategically avoided the emerging innovators area where Greenthread's booth stood. I caught a glimpse of Olivia across the hall, holding court in a perfectly tailored emerald suit, and quickly turned away. Thomas Harrington's keynote was scheduled for the afternoon of the first day. We secured seats near the front of the hall, and I listened intently as he outlined his investment philosophy. Unlike many venture capitalists, he emphasized patience, the willingness to build businesses that solved fundamental problems rather than chasing quick returns. The truly transformative companies aren't looking for exits in 3 years, said, his voice carrying surprising warmth for someone of his stature. They're building solutions designed to last decades because the problems they address, climate change, resource depletion, ethical labor, aren't quick fixes. I scribbled notes furiously, hearing my own values reflected in his words. When the session ended, Eleanor gripped my arm. "It's time," she said. "He's doing a small meet and greet for select attendees, and I've got us on the list." My stomach lurched. Now? I thought we were meeting him tomorrow. Plans changed. His assistant just texted me. He's had a cancellation and can give us 15 minutes right now. Panic fluttered in my chest. My carefully prepared pitch suddenly felt inadequate. "Eleanor, I'm not ready." "You're as ready as you'll ever be," she said firmly. "This is your shot, Jamie. Take it." The meeting room was tucked away from the main convention bustle. Only 8 other people had secured this coveted time slot, all established entrepreneurs or academics with impressive credentials. I was clearly the youngest and least experienced person in the room. Thomas Harrington moved through the small gathering, spending a few minutes with each person. He was older than his photos suggested, with silver hair and the weathered complexion of someone who spent time outdoors. When he reached us, Eleanor made a brief introduction. "Tom, this is Jamie Chen, the young entrepreneur I mentioned. She's developing a revolutionary approach to sustainable fashion manufacturing." His keen eyes assessed me. Eleanor rarely uses the word revolutionary, so you have my attention. You have 3 minutes to tell me why your business matters. Just like that, the moment had arrived. I took a deep breath, pushing aside thoughts of Olivia, of my parents' dismissal, of all the times I'd been overlooked. "The sustainable fashion industry has a scaling problem," I began. "Small designers can maintain ethical standards but can't achieve price points that make widespread adoption possible. Large brands claim sustainability but compromise standards as they scale. ThreadCycle bridges that gap." I outlined my vision for an integrated platform that would standardize and streamline ethical manufacturing while maintaining accountability at every step. I explained how we would leverage technology to create transparency across the supply chain, from raw material sourcing to finished goods. Most importantly, I concluded, we're not just creating another marketplace. We're building infrastructure that makes sustainable fashion economically viable at scale. That's the only way to create lasting change in an industry that accounts for 10% of global carbon emissions. Harrington listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he asked a question that caught me off guard. "Your sister's company, Greenthread, is downstairs right now with a similar concept. Why should I believe you're the one who can execute this vision?" My heart stopped. He knew about Olivia. Of course he knew. He did his research. For a terrifying moment, I considered lying, pretending I didn't know what he was talking about. But instinct told me that authenticity was my only play. "Greenthread copied my initial concept," I said evenly. "What they're showing downstairs is ThreadCycle 1.0, a curated marketplace model. What I'm proposing is fundamentally different and much more ambitious." His eyebrows rose slightly. "That's quite an accusation." "It's not an accusation. It's context," I replied, surprised by my own composure. "I'm not here to complain about my sister. I'm here because I've identified a real market opportunity that requires significant capital and expertise to address. Whether you decide to hear more about it should depend on the strength of the business model, not family drama. A flicker of something, approval, crossed his face. He handed me his card. I have a longer opening tomorrow morning at 7:30, the hotel restaurant. Bring your full pitch deck and financial projections. And with that, he moved on to the next person. Later, in our hotel room, I alternated between elation and terror. Eleanor helped me refine my presentation late into the night, ruthlessly cutting slides and strengthening key points. Remember, she said as we finally prepared for bed, he's not just evaluating the business, he's evaluating you, your resilience, your adaptability. Show him both. Sleep evaded me entirely. At 6:45 a.m., I was already seated in the hotel restaurant, reviewing my notes one final time. Harrington arrived precisely at 7:30, ordered coffee for both of us, and got straight to business. "Show me the numbers behind this vision," he said without preamble. For the next hour, I walked him through everything: market analysis, financial projections, technical architecture, scaling strategy. He interrupted frequently with incisive questions that probed the weaknesses in my model. Some I had answers, or others forced me to acknowledge limitations. "You're missing expertise in manufacturing logistics," he noted. "Yes," I agreed. "That's a key hire we'd make with initial funding." "Your customer acquisition costs seem optimistic. They're based on conversion rates from similar B2B platforms, but you're right, they could be higher initially. I've modeled a more conservative scenario here." I flipped to my contingency projections. Back and forth we went, my anxiety giving way to the intellectual challenge of defending my vision. Finally, he sat back and studied me with that penetrating gaze. "Why are you the right founder for this business, Ms. Chen?" I had prepared for this question, but in that moment, the practiced answer felt hollow. Instead, I decided to speak from the heart. Because I understand both sides of the equation personally. I've worked retail, seeing firsthand what customers actually buy versus what they say they value. I've built relationships with designers, learning their production challenges intimately. I've researched manufacturing processes not as abstract concepts, but as practical solutions. I leaned forward slightly. But most importantly, I have absolute conviction that this model is necessary. The fashion industry's environmental impact is catastrophic and growing. Incremental improvements aren't enough. We need structural change. Harrington was silent for a long moment, his fingers tapping lightly on the table edge. Finally, he spoke. "Your sister made a similar pitch yesterday afternoon." The statement hit me like a physical blow. I struggled to keep my expression neutral as he continued. "Green Thread is seeking $2 million in seed funding. They have traction, early partnerships with designers, a waiting list of customers. Their model is proven, lower risk." He paused, studying my reaction. "They also mentioned that you might approach investors with a similar concept, characterizing it as—" what was the phrase? "A less experienced imitation." The calculated cruelty of it stole my breath. Olivia had not only stolen my idea, but was now actively working to undermine my funding prospects. I felt sick, but forced myself to respond, calmly. "Did she mention that Green Thread's entire concept was developed after I shared my business plan with her in confidence?" "She did not," Harrington replied, his tone giving nothing away. "Mr. Harrington," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I can't control what my sister says about me. What I can tell you is that ThreadCycle's model addresses fundamental problems that Green Thread ignores entirely. They're creating a beautiful facade for a broken system. I'm rebuilding the system itself. I began gathering my materials, a strange calm descending over me. If you believe a curated marketplace is the solution this industry needs, green thread is probably your investment. If you believe, as I do, that we need to transform how sustainable garments are produced and tracked from raw material to consumer, then we should continue this conversation. I stood, extending my hand. Thank you for your time, regardless of your decision. Harrington remained seated, regarding me thoughtfully. You're walking away? I'm respecting your time, I corrected, and maintaining my own dignity. A slow smile spread across his face, the first real one I'd seen. Sit down, Ms. Chen. I haven't made any decisions yet. I lowered myself back into the chair, heart pounding. What would you do with $5 million? He asked. The figure was so far beyond what I'd been prepared to request that I nearly laughed. Instead, I took a deep breath and outlined exactly how I would allocate those resources. The technical team I'd build, the manufacturing partnerships I'd develop, the traceability system I'd implement. When I finished, Harrington nodded once, decisively. Harrington Capital doesn't typically fund pre-revenue startups at this level, but we're making an exception in your case. He slid a business card across the table. This is my personal attorney. Call him this afternoon to begin due diligence. Assuming everything checks out, we'll draft term sheets next week. I stared at him, unable to fully process his words. You're investing in Thread Cycle? I'm investing in you, Ms. Chen. The business is promising but unproven. You, however, have demonstrated exactly the qualities I look for in a founder. He stood, signaling the end of our meeting. Resourcefulness, integrity, and the rare ability to channel personal setbacks into professional innovation. As he turned to leave, he paused. One piece of advice: don't build this business to prove something to your sister. Build it because the world needs it. The former motivation will burn you out. The latter will sustain you through the inevitable challenges ahead. With that, he was gone, leaving me alone with a business card that represented everything I'd been working toward. I sat motionless for several minutes, allowing the reality to sink in. $5 million. The resources to build Thread Cycle properly from day one. Validation from one of the most respected investors in the sustainable business community. When I finally called Eleanor, my voice shook with disbelief. He's investing $5 million. Her whoop of joy was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. I knew it. I absolutely knew it. Jamie, do you realize what this means? I did. It meant Thread Cycle was no longer just a concept. It was becoming real. It meant I had a fighting chance against Green Thread, against Olivia's connections and head start. But most importantly, it meant someone believed in my vision, not as a cute side project, but as a serious business with transformative potential. The summit's final day passed in a daze. I attended sessions on sustainable supply chain management, with new purpose, taking detailed notes and making connections with potential partners. I deliberately avoided the exhibition hall, not trusting myself to maintain composure if I encountered Olivia. That evening, as Eleanor and I prepared to return to Portland, my phone chimed with a text from my mother. Olivia tells us she saw you at the summit. Dinner at our house Sunday to hear about both your experiences. Your father's grilling salmon. The casual normalcy of it was almost surreal. My mother had no idea about the collision course her daughters were now on. Part of me wanted to decline, to protect my still fragile victory from Olivia's inevitable attempts to diminish it. But a stronger impulse prevailed, the desire to stand, on equal footing with my sister for once. I texted back a simple, "I'll be there," then turned to Eleanor. "Ready to build a company?" I asked. Her smile was answer enough. As our train pulled away from Seattle, I gazed out at the passing landscape, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. The funding was just the beginning. Now came the hard part, turning my vision into reality under intense pressure and scrutiny. Olivia had stolen my original idea, believing that execution was all that mattered. Now I had the chance to prove that innovation, true, meaningful innovation, couldn't be copied so easily. It came from deep understanding, personal commitment, and the courage to challenge broken systems rather than simply profiting from their failure. The family dinner loomed in my mind. The inevitable confrontation with Olivia. The moment when our competing visions would be laid bare before our parents. But for the first time, I wasn't dreading the comparison. I was ready for it. The next morning, I called Harrington's attorney and began the due diligence process. By Friday, we had preliminary paperwork drawn up. The terms were favorable but demanding. Harrington Capital would take a 30% equity stake in exchange for the funding, with clear performance benchmarks I'd need to hit to unlock each tranche of investment. I spent Saturday in my apartment, preparing for Sunday's dinner with the same intensity I'd brought to my investor pitch. This wasn't just a family gathering anymore. It was my first opportunity to position ThreadCycle publicly in direct contrast to Green Thread. When Sunday evening arrived, I dressed with deliberate care, a simple black dress that projected confidence without flashiness, paired with my grandmother's jade pendant for a touch of personal significance. I arrived exactly on time, steeling myself as I approached my parents' front door. Inside, the scene was painfully familiar. My father at the grill, my mother arranging appetizers, and Olivia holding court in the living room. She faltered mid-sentence, when she saw me, quickly recovering with a too bright smile. "Jamie, I was just telling Mom and Dad about the summit. Such an amazing event, wasn't it? We should have connected there." The artificial warmth in her voice made my skin crawl, but I matched her smile with one of my own. "It was certainly illuminating," I replied, accepting a glass of wine from my father. "I had back-to-back meetings most days." "Meetings? With whom?" my mother asked, her interest piqued. Before I could answer, Olivia jumped in. "Jamie, you should have stopped by our booth. Green Thread was selected for the Emerging Innovators Showcase. We were absolutely swamped with interest." The old Jamie would have retreated, allowing Olivia to dominate the conversation. But I was no longer that person. "That's wonderful," I said evenly. I was focused on investor meetings myself. It was quite productive. My father raised an eyebrow. "Investors? For what exactly?" "ThreadCycle," I replied, taking a deliberate sip of wine. "My sustainable fashion ecosystem." Olivia's smile tightened imperceptibly. Jamie had a concept similar to Green Thread a while back. It's sweet that she's still pursuing it. The condescension in her tone was unmistakable. My mother, ever sensitive to tension, quickly intervened. "Well, isn't that lovely? Both my girls in sustainable fashion. You could collaborate." I met Olivia's gaze directly. "Our models are actually quite different now. Green Thread is a marketplace connecting consumers with sustainable brands. ThreadCycle is building infrastructure to transform how sustainable garments are manufactured and tracked." My father, always more perceptive than he let on, studied me with new interest. "And these investors you mentioned? Anyone significant?" "Harrington Capital," I said, watching Olivia's expression shift from dismissive to shocked. "We've reached an agreement in principle. The paperwork should be finalized this week." A heavy silence fell over the room. My mother looked confused, glancing between her daughters with growing concern. My father whistled low under his breath, clearly recognizing the name. "Thomas Harrington is investing in your concept?" Olivia finally asked, her voice strained. $5 million in seed funding," I confirmed, the words carrying a quiet satisfaction I couldn't suppress. "He believes the industry needs structural change, not just better retail options." My father abandoned the grill, moving into the living room with undisguised interest. $5 million is a serious investment for a concept stage business. He must see substantial potential. The due diligence was intense, I acknowledged. But he's committed to backing ventures that address root causes, not symptoms. The implication hung in the air, that green thread was treating symptoms while thread cycle tackled causes. Olivia's face flushed with anger or embarrassment. I couldn't tell which. Well, my mother said brightly, desperately trying to diffuse the tension. This is wonderful news for both of you. My brilliant daughters, both entrepreneurs. But the dynamic had shifted undeniably. For the first time in our adult lives, Olivia wasn't the automatic center of attention and admiration. My father peppered me with questions about Harrington's investment strategy and my business model, showing more interest in my work than he had in years. Throughout dinner, Olivia attempted repeatedly to redirect conversation back to Green Thread's achievements, their growing wait list, their designer partnerships, their upcoming feature in a national magazine. But her announcements, once guaranteed to elicit effusive praise, now met with polite acknowledgement before attention swung back to the surprise of my significant funding round. As the evening wore on, I caught Olivia watching me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of confusion, resentment, and something that looked remarkably like respect. The power balance between us had shifted, subtly but unmistakably. When dinner ended, Olivia cornered me in the kitchen as I helped clear plates. Harrington turned us down, she said quietly, her voice tight. Said our model wasn't ambitious? Enough. I absorbed this revelation without visible reaction. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? She challenged. Because it seems like you're enjoying this reversal a little too much. I set down the stack of plates I was carrying and turned to face her fully. What did you expect, Olivia? You stole my business concept, announced it at a family dinner like it was your original idea, and then tried to undermine me with Harrington. Her eyes widened slightly. He told you about that? He told me enough, I replied. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I'd just give up and let you take credit for my work? It wasn't exactly your work, she countered, her voice dropping to ensure our parents couldn't overhear. It was just an idea. Ideas are worthless without execution. You're right about that, I agreed. But you underestimated my ability to execute. You saw the surface of my business plan but missed the depth of thinking behind it. That was your mistake. For a moment, vulnerability cracked through her polished facade. I didn't think you'd actually secure funding like that. You've never been taken seriously? I finished for her. Been ambitious enough? Been as successful as you? I know. That's what made it so easy to dismiss me. Regret flashed across her face, quickly replaced by defensiveness. It's business. Jamie, it's competitive. If you can't handle that, I'm handling it just fine, I interrupted calmly. $5 million in seed funding suggests I'm handling it exceptionally well, in fact. I picked up the plates again, ready to end the conversation. Green Thread and Thread Cycle will be operating in the same space now. We can do that as respectful competitors or as bitter rivals. That choice is largely yours. As I turned to leave, she called after me, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. Jamie, wait. This changes everything between us. You understand that, right? I paused, looking back at my sister. The golden child, the achiever, the one whose shadow I'd lived in for so long. In her eyes, I saw genuine apprehension. For the first time in our relationship, she was afraid of me. Or rather, afraid of what I might become. Yes, I replied simply. It does. I rejoined our parents in the dining room, leaving Olivia alone in the kitchen. The evening concluded with unusual warmth from my father, who hugged me tightly at the door. You surprised me, he admitted quietly, in the best possible way. As I drove home that night, a strange mixture of emotions swirled inside me. Pride in what I'd accomplished, vindication after years of being overlooked, and underneath it all, a lingering sadness for the sisterly relationship that now seemed irrevocably changed. But alongside these feelings was something new and powerful, absolute clarity of purpose. Thread Cycle was no longer about proving something to Olivia or my family. It was about creating meaningful change in an industry desperate for innovation. Thomas Harrington had seen that in me, even when those closest to me had not. The coming months would test everything I thought I knew about business, about myself, and about my capacity for leadership. The path ahead would be harder than anything I'd faced before. But for the first time, I was walking that path on my own terms, with resources to match my ambition and validation of my vision. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. I was no longer the overlooked sister. I had found my voice, and I intended to use it. The weeks following that pivotal family dinner unfolded in a whirlwind. The investment from Harrington Capital became official with a ceremonial signing at their downtown Portland office. I sat across from Thomas Harrington himself, pen hovering over the documents that would irrevocably change the trajectory of my life. "Second thoughts?" he asked, noticing my hesitation. I shook my head, just appreciating the moment. With a single signature, ThreadCycle transformed from concept to company. The first $1 million would be transferred immediately, with subsequent tranches tied to specific milestones. The pressure was immense, but so was the exhilaration. My first official act as CEO was to offer Eleanor the position of Chief Operating Officer. We met at Cascade Brew, the coffee shop where I'd spent countless hours drafting business plans. "I'm honored," she said, genuinely moved by the offer. "But are you sure? There are more experienced operations people out there. I need someone who understands both sides of this business, the idealism driving our mission and the pragmatism needed to execute it. That's you." She accepted with a firm handshake that evolved into a tight hug. "You know this means leaving the boutique behind." "We'll find an excellent manager," I assured her, already mentally listing potential candidates. Together, we drew up a hiring plan. Our first priorities were a chief technology officer to build the platform and to supply, chain director with experience in sustainable textiles. We needed office space, legal counsel, accounting services. The list of necessities grew daily. I leased a modest space in a refurbished warehouse in Portland's industrial district. The exposed brick and timber beams carried a history of manufacturing that felt symbolically appropriate for our mission. Eleanor and I spent a weekend scouring secondhand stores for office furniture, refusing to buy new items for a company dedicated to sustainability. My apartment became a secondary workspace. When the office closed each night, I lived on takeout and determination, often falling asleep amid spreadsheets only to jolt awake with new ideas I needed to capture before they evaporated. The local business press caught wind of Harrington's investment. When the Portland Business Journal requested an interview, I hesitated, tempted to keep a low profile while we built our foundation. Eleanor disagreed. "Visibility is currency in this industry," she argued. "Besides, you earned this moment." The resulting article, "Portland Entrepreneur Secures $5 million for Sustainable Fashion Venture," featured a photo of me standing confidently in our new office space. I sent copies to my parents without comment, a quiet assertion of my achievement. My father called that evening, his tone different from any I'd heard before, less evaluative, more collegial. "This is impressive, Jamie. Really impressive. I'd like to hear more about your business model when you have time." The article also caught Olivia's attention. She texted, "Quite the publicity push. Hope you're planning to back it up with substance." I didn't respond. Our interactions had grown increasingly strained. She attended family gatherings with Marcus, both of them carefully avoiding direct discussion of their business in my presence. I reciprocated the courtesy, though our parents' attempts to pretend all was normal grew more awkward by the week. Meanwhile, ThreadCycle began taking tangible form. We hired Devin, my programmer friend, as our technical lead. His first task was developing a prototype of our supply chain management platform, the technology that would connect designers with verified ethical manufacturers and track materials from source to finished product. Finding our supply chain. Director proved more challenging. We needed someone with both textile manufacturing experience and a genuine commitment to sustainability, a rare combination. After weeks of unsuccessful interviews, Eleanor suggested looking beyond traditional fashion channels. What about someone from organic food certification? The principles of supply chain verification are similar. Her insight led us to Mei Lin, who had spent a decade developing traceability systems for organic products across Asia. Her experience with certification protocols and her fluency in Mandarin, essential for working with Chinese manufacturers, made her the perfect fit for our vision. With our core team assembled, we established aggressive timelines. The platform prototype needed to be functional within 3 months. We needed to secure partnerships with at least 10 sustainable manufacturers and 20 designers before our official launch. Supply chain protocols had to be developed, tested, and refined. Every morning, I arrived at the office by 6, reviewing progress reports and adjusting priorities before the team arrived. Every evening, I was the last to leave, often past midnight. The intensity was unsustainable long-term, but necessary to maintain our momentum. 6 weeks in, we hit our first serious obstacle. Our attorney discovered that one of our planned features, a blockchain-based verification system for tracking raw materials, potentially infringed on a patent held by a European company. Redesigning the technology would delay our launch by months. I called an emergency team meeting. We have 3 options, I explained, facing my small but dedicated staff. We can license their technology, fight the patent claim, or develop an alternative approach. May advocated for licensing. It's the fastest path forward, even though it cuts into our margins. Devin disagreed. Their implementation is flawed anyway. I could build something better in 6 weeks. 6 weeks we don't have, Eleanor reminded him gently. I listened to the debate, weighing each perspective. This was the reality of leadership, navigating between competing priorities with incomplete information. Finally, I made the call. We'll pursue dual tracks. Devin, you have 3 weeks to develop a viable alternative. If it works, great. If not, we'll negotiate a licensing agreement. The team nodded, accepting the decision without further debate. It was a small moment, but significant. The first time I'd made a consequential choice that affected others' work and our company's trajectory. It wouldn't be the last. That evening, as I reviewed financial projections, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Having a small dinner Saturday for your father's birthday, just family. Please come. It's important to him. I hadn't seen my parents in weeks, using work as a convenient excuse. Part of me wanted to decline, to avoid the inevitable tension with Olivia. But I missed my father, and his recent interest in my business had begun healing a relationship that had always been cordial, but distant. I'll be there, I texted back. Saturday arrived with unseasonable warmth, a rare gift of sunshine in Portland's typically rainy spring. I picked up a bottle of my father's favorite Willamette Valley Pinot Noir and drove to Lake Oswego with windows down, savoring the momentary escape from spreadsheets and strategy sessions. The family home looked the same as always, meticulously maintained, tastefully decorated, a physical manifestation of my parents' understated success. I found my mother in the kitchen, arranging an elaborate charcuterie board. "There you are," she exclaimed, embracing me with genuine warmth. "We've barely seen you since the investment news. You're working too hard, I can tell." Her concern was touching, even if she couldn't truly understand the pressure I was under. "It's intense right now, but necessary. Where's Dad?" "On the deck, with Olivia and Marcus." They arrived early. Of course they did. I steeled myself and headed outside. My father stood at the grill, engaged in animated conversation with Marcus about some obscure tax regulation. Olivia sat nearby, nursing a glass of wine. She was impeccably styled as always, not a hair out of place despite the breeze coming off the lake. My father brightened when he saw me. "There's my other entrepreneur. Jamie, Marcus, and I were just discussing the new Opportunity Zone incentives. Have you looked into them for ThreadCycle?" "We're exploring all options," I replied non-committally, accepting his embrace. "Happy birthday, Dad." Olivia's smile was practiced perfection. "Jamie, you're looking busy. How's the company building going?" The subtle emphasis on company building carried its own barb, a suggestion that ThreadCycle was still more concept than reality. Once, the comment would have triggered my insecurities. Now, it merely revealed hers. "Intensely rewarding," I replied. "We've assembled an incredible team. I'd love to hear how Green Thread is progressing." Marcus jumped in before Olivia could respond. "We've just secured partnerships with 15 designers across the Pacific Northwest. The platform launches next month." "That's wonderful," I said with genuine acknowledgement. Their success didn't diminish ThreadCycle's potential, and I was determined not to let sibling rivalry cloud my professional judgment. The industry needs multiple approaches to solve its sustainability challenges. Olivia studied me with narrowed eyes, clearly surprised by my graciousness. For a fleeting moment, I glimpsed something like regret in her expression, but dinner was called before either of us could say more. The meal proceeded with strained politeness. My parents attempted to distribute their interest evenly between their daughters' ventures, asking carefully balanced questions. Marcus dominated much of the conversation, his natural charm filling potentially awkward silences. I focused on making my father's birthday pleasant, sharing anecdotes from ThreadCycle's early days that made him laugh. As my mother served dessert, my father cleared his throat. "I have an announcement that seems fitting given our entrepreneurial table." We all turned to him expectantly. "I've decided to take early retirement from the firm. 30 years is enough," he said, his expression a mixture of relief and anticipation. "I want to use my experience differently in this next chapter." My mother reached for his hand, clearly already privy to the news. "Your father's been considering this for some time." "That's wonderful, Dad," Olivia said. "You can finally take that extended sailing trip you've been talking about for years." He nodded, but his gaze shifted to me. "Actually, I've been thinking about something else. Jamie, your business model is fascinating to me. The legal structure of these supply chain partnerships, the verification protocols, they present complex challenges that align with my expertise." My heartbeat quickened as I began to understand where he was heading. "I'd like to offer my services to ThreadCycle as legal counsel," he continued. "Not as an employee, but as a consultant. No charge for the first 6 months while I transition from the firm. After that, we can reassess." The table fell silent. My mother beamed with obvious approval. Marcus studied his plate with sudden fascination. And Olivia looked as though she'd been slapped. "Dad, are you serious?" I asked, struggling to process the offer. "Completely. Of course, only if you feel my involvement would benefit the company. I understand if you prefer to maintain independence." The sincere respect in his voice, his acknowledgement that this was my decision to make, nearly brought tears to my eyes. This man who had always been somewhat remote, whose approval had seemed perpetually just out of reach, was now asking to be part of my professional journey. "I'd be honored," I said simply. Olivia abruptly stood, her chair scraping against the deck. "I need some air." She disappeared inside before anyone could respond. My father's expression clouded with concern. "I should have discussed this with both of you first," he said, the excitement draining from his face. "I didn't think—" "It's not your fault," I assured him, though guilt twisted in my stomach. This moment that should have been purely positive was now tainted by the ongoing tension between his daughters. Let me talk to her. I found Olivia in our old bedroom, sitting rigidly on the edge of what had once been her bed. The room had been redecorated as a guest space years ago, but echoes of our childhood remained. A bookshelf we'd shared, a small scuff on the wall where Olivia had once thrown a trophy in frustration after placing second in a debate competition. "That was quite the coup," she said without looking up. "Dad working for you. The perfect ending to your redemption story." "He's not working for me," I corrected gently. "He's offering his expertise as a consultant, and I had no idea he was planning this." "It doesn't matter. It's symbolic, isn't it? The ultimate validation." I sat on the opposite bed, the distance between us charged with decades of complicated emotions. "That's not why I accepted." "No?" Her voice was sharp with disbelief. "You're telling me you don't feel satisfied knowing Dad finally sees you as the successful daughter?" "Of course I'm glad he recognizes what I'm building," I admitted. "But I accepted because his skills are valuable to ThreadCycle. This isn't about competing with you, Olivia." She finally looked at me, her expression a mixture of anger and hurt. "Everything has been a competition between us since we were children. Don't pretend you don't remember." "I remember," I said quietly. "I remember feeling like I could never measure up to you. I remember having my achievements dismissed while yours were celebrated. I remember learning to work quietly because speaking up only invited comparison." My words hung in the air between us. For once, Olivia didn't immediately counter with justification or dismissal. Instead, something vulnerable flickered across her face. "Is that really how you experienced it?" she asked, her voice smaller than I'd heard it in years. "Yes," I said simply. "It is." She was quiet for a long moment, seeming to genuinely consider this perspective. "I always thought you had it easier. No expectations, no pressure. You could pursue whatever interested you while I had to maintain this perfect trajectory." The revelation stunned me. All these years, I'd assumed Olivia reveled in her golden child status, never imagining she might have felt constrained by it. "We've both been operating under false assumptions," I said carefully. "But that doesn't excuse stealing my business idea, Olivia. That crossed a line." She flinched visibly. "I know. She trailed off, then squared her shoulders, and continued with surprising candor. "When you told me about ThreadCycle, it was the first time I truly felt jealous of you. Your concept was brilliant, and so aligned with where the market is heading. I saw an opportunity and I took it, convincing myself that ideas are just starting. Points anyway." Her admission wasn't quite an apology, but it was the closest thing to accountability I'd heard from her. Progress, however small. "GreenThread and ThreadCycle are diverging now anyway," I said. "Your marketplace model serves a different purpose than our manufacturing infrastructure approach." "That's diplomatically put," she replied with a hint of her usual sharpness. "But we both know Harrington chose your vision over mine because it's more ambitious." I couldn't deny it, so I didn't try. "The industry needs both approaches. There's room for GreenThread and ThreadCycle to succeed." "Perhaps," she conceded. "But don't expect me to make it easy for you. I still believe in GreenThread's potential." "I wouldn't respect you if you didn't fight for your company," I said honestly. "All I'm suggesting is that our professional competition doesn't need to poison our personal relationship." Olivia stood, smoothing her dress with a practiced gesture. "It's a little late for that, don't you think?" "I hope not," I said, rising as well. "We can be rivals without being enemies." She studied me for a long moment, as if seeing me properly, for the first time in years. "When did you become so centered? So confident?" "When I stopped measuring my worth against yours," I replied simply. "When I found something bigger than our sibling dynamic to believe in." A complex emotion crossed her face, something like respect mingled with regret. Without another word, she turned and left the room. I remained behind, processing the conversation. It wasn't reconciliation, exactly, but it was an honest exchange, perhaps the first real one we'd had as adults. I rejoined the dinner party. A few minutes later, Olivia had composed herself, skillfully redirecting the conversation to safe topics. My father caught my eye, raising a questioning eyebrow. I gave him a subtle nod of reassurance. As the evening wound down, he pulled me aside. "Is everything all right with Olivia?" "It's complicated," I admitted, "but we're finding our way to a new normal." He nodded thoughtfully. "You know my offer stands regardless of any tension between you two. I believe in what you're building, Jamie. This isn't about choosing sides." But in some ways, it was exactly that. A symbolic shift in the family dynamic that had defined my childhood and early adulthood. I accepted this truth silently, grateful for his support while acknowledging the complexity it added to an already strained sibling relationship. When I returned to the office Monday morning, I shared my father's offer with the leadership team. Eleanor was enthusiastic, recognizing the value of having experienced legal counsel without the associated costs. May and Devin had reservations about introducing family dynamics into the business, but ultimately deferred to my judgment. We established clear parameters for my father's involvement, specific legal projects rather than general oversight, structured meeting times rather than unlimited access. I was determined to maintain professional boundaries while leveraging his considerable expertise. His first assignment was reviewing our manufacturer agreements, strengthening the language around environmental compliance and ethical labor practices. The documents he returned were transformed, more comprehensive, more enforceable, yet still accessible to small producers. His work confirmed what I'd always suspected. My father was exceptional at his profession, bringing a depth of knowledge that would have cost us hundreds of thousands to secure elsewhere. Meanwhile, Devaney had made a breakthrough with our tracking technology, developing a proprietary verification system that avoided the patent infringement issue entirely. The solution was elegant, using a combination of QR codes and RFID tags to track materials from raw state to finished garment. "We can actually license this to other companies," he explained excitedly, walking us through the demo. "It could become a revenue stream of its own." The possibilities expanded my vision for ThreadCycle further. What had begun as a platform, connecting designers with ethical manufacturers, was evolving into a comprehensive ecosystem for sustainable fashion production. Exactly what I'd promised Harrington. By month 3, we'd secured partnerships with 7 manufacturers across North America and Asia, all vetted personally by May through site visits and extensive documentation review. Unlike typical fashion manufacturing relationships, ours included stringent environmental and labor requirements, backed by regular audits and transparency reporting. The manufacturing partners initially balked at these conditions, but our differential, guaranteed minimum orders and higher margins, eventually won them over. We were creating not just a business, but a new standard for the industry. Designer. Recruitment proved more straightforward. Small sustainable brands were desperate for reliable manufacturing at scale. When word spread about ThreadCycle's model, applications flooded in. We selected our initial cohort of 15 designers based on their commitment to sustainability and commercial viability. As our launch date approached, I maintained a grueling schedule. 18-hour days were standard, with meals eaten at my desk and sleep treated as a luxury rather than a necessity. Eleanor worried about my pace. "You can't sustain this," she cautioned during a rare, quiet moment. "You need to delegate more." "After the launch," I promised, knowing I was postponing the inevitable. My identity had become so intertwined with ThreadCycle that stepping back felt impossible, even as I recognized the wisdom in her advice. 2 weeks before our platform was scheduled to go live, the unexpected occurred. My assistant interrupted a planning meeting, her expression unusually grave. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "Olivia Chen. She says it's urgent." Eleanor shot me a warning look. "Want me to handle it?" "No," I replied, curiosity overriding caution. "Send her in." Olivia entered alone, her typically perfect appearance slightly disheveled. She had the unmistakable look of someone who hadn't slept properly in days. "I need to speak with you privately," she said without preamble. I nodded to my team, who filed out with varying degrees of reluctance. When the door closed behind them, Olivia remained standing, tension evident in every line of her body. "Green Thread is in trouble," she said bluntly. "Serious trouble." I gestured for her to sit, but she shook her head, too agitated for stillness. "What kind of trouble?" "Financial. Our main investor pulled out yesterday." Her voice was flat, controlled, but I could hear the undercurrent of panic. "He says the market's too uncertain, but the truth is, he's lost confidence in our model." I absorbed this information carefully. "I'm sorry to hear that. But why are you telling me?" She paced a small circuit in front of my desk. "We need bridge funding to survive until we can secure a new investment round. Without it, we'll have to shut down operations within 60 days. Understanding dawned. "You're asking ThreadCycle for money." "Not asking," she corrected sharply. "Proposing a strategic partnership. Green Thread has market presence, consumer trust, designer relationships. ThreadCycle has manufacturing infrastructure and capital. Together, we could be formidable." The proposal was so unexpected I couldn't immediately process its implications. Olivia Chen, who had stolen my idea, launched a competing company, and consistently undermined my efforts, was now suggesting we join forces. "This feels convenient," I said carefully. "When you were funded and we weren't, there was no talk of partnership." "That's fair," she acknowledged, surprising me with her candor. "But business circumstances change. Smart leaders adapt. And Marcus? Where does he stand on this proposal?" A shadow crossed her face. "Marcus resigned yesterday. He's taking a position with a competitor in Seattle." The pieces clicked into place. Green Thread wasn't just struggling, it was imploding. Olivia wasn't proposing a merger of equals, but throwing a lifeline to a sinking ship. "I need time to think about this," I said, unwilling to make a snap decision with such significant implications. "And I'll need to see your financials, user metrics, everything." "Of course," she agreed quickly, too quickly. I brought the preliminary documentation with me. She placed a flash drive on my desk. The preparation told me everything. This wasn't a desperate last-minute plea, but a calculated approach. Olivia had anticipated my requirements and come prepared. "I'll review these and get back to you," I promised, neither committing nor refusing outright. She nodded, seeming relieved to have completed her mission. At the door, she paused, turning back with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Jamie, I know our history makes this complicated, but I genuinely believe our businesses would be stronger together." After she left, I sat motionless, processing the encounter. Part of me wanted to dismiss her proposal outright, a visceral reaction to the history between us. But the businesswoman in me recognized the potential strategic value. Green Thread had indeed built consumer recognition and designer relationships that would benefit ThreadCycle. I called my core team back in and explained the situation with complete transparency. Their reactions were predictably mixed. "This feels like a trap," Devin said immediately, his loyalty fierce. "After everything she did?" May was more measured. "The marketplace side would accelerate our go-to-market strategy by months. That has real value." Eleanor, who had witnessed the entire arc of my relationship with Olivia, studied me carefully. "What do you want to do, Jamie? Setting aside the business case for a moment, can you work with your sister after everything that's happened?" It was the question I'd been avoiding. The business logic could be analyzed objectively, But the personal dimension was messier, clouded by decades of complicated emotions. I don't know, I admitted, but I'm not going to make this decision based on personal history. We'll evaluate the proposal on its merits. I handed the flash drive to our CFO for analysis and instructed the team to proceed with launch preparations as planned. Whatever decision we made about Green Thread wouldn't derail our core mission. That night, alone in my apartment, I finally allowed myself to fully process Olivia's proposal. The irony wasn't lost on me. After stealing my business idea, my sister was now offering me control of the company she'd built with it. If I accepted, I'd essentially become the majority stakeholder in both our ventures, a complete reversal of the dynamic she'd established when she'd launched Green Thread. The temptation to see this as vindication, as a form of justice, was strong. But I recognized that impulse as the lingering shadow of old wounds rather than sound business judgment. ThreadCycle needed to absorb Green Thread because it made strategic sense, not because it satisfied my ego. I pulled out a notebook and began methodically listing the pros and cons, forcing myself to think as a CEO rather than a wounded sibling. By dawn, I had clarity about the path forward, one that would challenge both my business acumen and my capacity for personal growth. The analysis from our CFO arrived the following afternoon, confirming my suspicions. Green Thread's financial situation was indeed precarious, but its user acquisition metrics and designer partnerships were impressive. They had built a loyal customer base hungry for sustainable fashion options, exactly the end market ThreadCycle needed to serve. I called a leadership meeting to share my decision. We're going to make a counteroffer, I announced. Not a partnership, but an acquisition. ThreadCycle will purchase Green Thread's assets, technology, and customer relationships. And Olivia? Eleanor asked the question everyone was thinking. She'll be offered a position as head of marketplace strategy, reporting directly to me, I said, having considered this carefully. Her skills complement our team, and she has valuable insight into the consumer side of the business. Devin looked skeptical. Can you trust her in that role? Trust has to start somewhere, I replied. If we move forward, there will be clear performance metrics and boundaries. This isn't a favor, it's a business decision. The team nodded, accepting my reasoning, if not entirely convinced. I asked our CFO to prepare an offer based on Green Thread's current valuation, significantly lower than what they'd raised initially, but fair given their financial position. When the paperwork was ready, I called Olivia myself rather than delegating the task. I'd like to discuss our response to your proposal. Can you meet tomorrow morning? Of course, she said, trying to mask the relief in her voice. I'll come. To your office. No, I decided. Let's meet on neutral ground. Cascade Brew at 9 a.m. The coffee shop where I'd spent countless hours developing ThreadCycle's original business plan felt symbolically appropriate for this meeting. I arrived early, selecting a quiet corner table that offered privacy without isolation. Olivia arrived, precisely on time, dressed immaculately as always, though I noticed the subtle signs of strain, shadows under her expertly concealed makeup, tension around her mouth. She slid into the seat across from me, her expression carefully neutral. Thanks for meeting, I began, pushing a folder across the table. This is our formal response to your proposal. She opened it, scanning the contents quickly. Her expression shifted from hopeful to confused to wary as she absorbed the terms. This isn't a partnership, she said finally. It's an acquisition. Yes, I confirmed. ThreadCycle will acquire Green Thread's assets, technology, and customer relationships at the valuation specified. We'll integrate the marketplace platform into our broader ecosystem. She closed the folder slowly. And what happens to me in this scenario? You'd join ThreadCycle as head of marketplace strategy, reporting directly to me, I said, maintaining eye contact. Your expertise in consumer marketing and designer relationships would be valuable to our integrated model. A complicated series of emotions crossed her face. relief that there was a place for her, resistance to the idea of working under me, calculation of her limited alternatives. "You'd be my boss," she said, testing how the words felt. "I'd be the CEO," I corrected. "You'd be a key leader with significant autonomy in your domain." Olivia took a sip of her coffee, buying time to compose her response. "The financial terms are lower than I'd hoped." "They reflect GreenThread's current position accurately," I replied, not unkindly but firmly. "We've based the valuation on standard multiples and your most recent metrics." She nodded, acknowledging the reality, if not necessarily accepting it. "You've thought this through carefully." "Yes," I agreed. "Both the business case and the personal implications." A hint of her old sharpness returned. "And you're comfortable having me work for you after everything that's happened between us?" "I'm willing to try if you are," I said honestly. "The question is whether you can accept reporting to your younger sister." The bluntness of the question hung between us. 6 months ago, the very idea would have been unthinkable to both of us. Me for lacking the confidence to lead her, Olivia for lacking the humility to follow my direction. She studied me with new eyes, seeing not the overlooked sister she'd always dismissed, but the CEO who had outmaneuvered her at every turn since that fateful dinner. "You've changed," she said finally. "We both have," I replied. "The question is whether we can move forward productively despite our history." Olivia tapped her manicured nails against the folder, weighing her limited options. GreenThread was failing. Without this deal, she faced not just financial loss, but public failure. Something she'd never experienced before. "I need 24 hours to consider the offer," she said finally. "That's reasonable," I agreed. "But we'll need an answer by this time tomorrow. ThreadCycle's launch timeline doesn't allow for extended negotiations." She stood, gathering her belongings with the same efficiency she applied to everything. "Thank you for the offer, Jamie. Whatever happens, I want you to know I recognize what you've built. It's impressive." Coming from Olivia, it was the highest compliment imaginable. I nodded my acknowledgement as she left, feeling strangely hollow despite having achieved the upper hand I'd once so desperately wanted. The next morning, precisely 24 hours later, Olivia's response arrived via email, a formal acceptance of ThreadCycle's acquisition offer, with a single additional request that her role be announced as co-founder of GreenThread, now head of marketplace strategy at ThreadCycle. It was a small concession that allowed her to save face publicly without affecting the substance of our agreement. I approved it immediately, recognizing it as a gesture that cost us nothing while preserving her dignity. The legal teams moved quickly, finalizing the acquisition within 10 days. ThreadCycle absorbed GreenThread's technology, customer base, and designer relationships. We retained their technical team, but restructured their marketing department to integrate with our existing operations. The announcement generated significant industry buzz. "Sustainable fashion startups merge to create integrated platform," read the headlines. The press coverage positioned the acquisition as a strategic consolidation rather than a rescue, giving both companies a dignified narrative. My father called the morning after the news broke, his voice warm with pride. "Well played, Jamie. This is a masterclass in strategic positioning." I appreciated his approval, even as I recognized that my need for it had diminished. It made business sense. The personal dynamics were secondary. "Nevertheless," he said, "you've handled both the business and personal sides with remarkable maturity. I should have recognized your capabilities much earlier." The acknowledgement was healing in ways I hadn't expected. "Thank you, Dad. That means a lot." Olivia joined ThreadCycle the following Monday, arriving at the office with characteristic punctuality. I'd arranged a private meeting before introducing her to the broader team, wanting to establish clear expectations from the outset. She entered my office with visible apprehension, her confidence temporarily shaken by the dramatic reversal in our professional positions. It was a strange moment for both of us, her standing before the desk where I now sat as CEO. "Welcome to ThreadCycle," I said, gesturing for her to sit. "How are you feeling about the transition?" "Honestly?" She settled into the chair, smoothing her skirt in a familiar, nervous gesture. "It's humbling and complicated, but also oddly liberating." Liberating? I hadn't expected that particular word. She nodded, seeming surprised herself. GreenThread was collapsing under the weight of investor expectations and my own. Rigidity. There's a certain freedom in starting fresh, even if it's not on my terms. Her candor was disarming. "I want you to succeed here, Olivia, not just for ThreadCycle's benefit, but for yours as well." "Why?" she asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. "After what I did, taking your idea, you could easily let me fail." "Because that wouldn't serve anyone," I replied simply. "Not the company, not our mission, and honestly, not me either. I don't want revenge. I want ThreadCycle to transform this industry, and you have skills that can help make that happen." She studied me with new respect. "You're a better person than I am, Jamie." "Not better," I disagreed. "Just different. We each have strengths the other lacks. That's why this could work, if we let it." For the first time in our adult lives, we shared a moment of genuine understanding. Sisters who had taken wildly different paths only to converge again under unexpected circumstances. "I accept your leadership," she said finally, the words clearly difficult for her. "I'll give ThreadCycle my best work." "That's all I ask," I replied, standing to signal our transition from personal to professional. "Now, let's introduce you to the team." As we walked together toward the conference room where ThreadCycle's staff awaited, I felt a peculiar sense of completion. Not an ending, but a realignment of long-standing patterns. The story that had begun with betrayal at a family dinner was transforming into something more complex and ultimately more meaningful. I had become the majority stakeholder in the company born from my stolen idea. But more importantly, I had discovered my own capacity for leadership, resilience, and growth beyond the limiting dynamics of my family. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would be many, I would face them not as Olivia's overlooked sister, but as Jamie Chen, CEO of ThreadCycle, architect of my own future. The integration of GreenThread into ThreadCycle presented challenges I hadn't fully anticipated. On paper, the acquisition made perfect strategic sense, combining GreenThread's consumer marketplace with ThreadCycle's manufacturing infrastructure created a comprehensive ecosystem for sustainable fashion. In reality, merging two companies built on fundamentally different cultures proved far more complex. GreenThread's team arrived with obvious apprehension. They had been Olivia's people, loyal to her vision and accustomed to her leadership style, which prioritized speed and visibility over ThreadCycle's methodical, infrastructure-focused approach. The first joint staff meeting crackled with unspoken tension. I stood before the combined team, acutely aware of the divided room. ThreadCycle employees on one side, former GreenThread staff on the other, with a visible gap between them that seemed to represent more than just physical space. "This integration isn't about one company absorbing another," I began, addressing the elephant in the room directly. "It's about combining complementary strengths to build something neither company could achieve alone." The words sounded rehearsed even to my own ears. Behind me, Eleanor nodded encouragingly, while Olivia maintained a carefully neutral expression from her seat in the front row. "I won't pretend this transition will be effortless," I continued more authentically. "We have different work styles, different priorities, and yes, a complicated history. But what unites us? A commitment to transforming the fashion industry's environmental impact matters more than what divides us." A GreenThread developer in the back raised his hand. What happens to projects already in our pipeline? Do they just disappear now? It was a fair question, and one that revealed the deeper anxiety beneath the surface, fear that their work, their contributions, would be erased in the merger. Nothing worth keeping disappears, I assured him. This week, every department will conduct integration workshops to evaluate ongoing projects from both companies. We'll prioritize based on strategic alignment and resource constraints, not based on which company originated the idea. The explicit acknowledgement that good ideas could come from either side seemed to ease some tension in the room. As the meeting progressed into specific integration timelines, I noticed small groups of engineers from both companies beginning to dialogue about technical compatibilities. Afterward, Eleanor pulled me aside. That went better than expected. The real test comes in day-to-day collaboration, I replied, watching the teams filter out. Announcements are easy. Cultural integration is the hard part. I wasn't wrong. The following weeks brought constant friction as working groups attempted to merge processes and priorities. ThreadCycle's engineers, accustomed to building robust infrastructure for the long term, clashed with GreenThread's team, who prioritized user experience and quick iterations. Quality assurance protocols that ThreadCycle considered essential were viewed as bureaucratic obstacles by GreenThread developers. Olivia, to her credit, navigated her new role with surprising grace. She advocated for her team's perspectives, without undermining my authority, walking a delicate line between representing GreenThread's approach and embracing ThreadCycle's vision. We established a weekly one-on-one meeting to address integration challenges and align on strategy. Our first session was stiff, both of us hyper-aware of our reversed power dynamic. The design team is struggling with the brand consolidation, she reported all business. GreenThread's aesthetic was deliberately high-end, fashion-forward. ThreadCycle's more utilitarian approach feels like a step backward to them. I considered this feedback carefully. There's value in both approaches. Our brand needs to communicate both style and substance. Can you work with both design teams to develop a hybrid aesthetic? She nodded, making notes. I think so. It would help if you spoke directly with the GreenThread designers. They need to hear from you that their expertise is valued. It was solid advice, revealing Olivia's genuine understanding of her team's needs. I scheduled the meeting immediately, recognizing that successful integration would require far more direct involvement than I'd initially planned. As days turned into weeks, small breakthroughs accumulated. A ThreadCycle engineer and GreenThread designer collaborated on a visualization tool for tracking materials through the supply chain, combining ThreadCycle's back-end expertise with GreenThread's user experience sensibility. Their enthusiasm was contagious, sparking similar cross-team initiatives. The external response to our merger exceeded expectations. Sustainable fashion publications praised the creation of a vertically integrated ethical fashion ecosystem. Designer applications doubled as word spread about our combined capabilities. Even mainstream business press took notice, with Fast Company featuring ThreadCycle in a piece on innovative supply chain models. Harrington was pleased with our progress, releasing the second tranche of funding ahead of schedule. "You've validated the core thesis," he said during our quarterly review. "Now it's time to scale." Scaling brought its own challenges. We needed larger manufacturing partnerships, more robust technical infrastructure, and expanded customer support. Our headcount grew from 30 to 70 in 3 months, straining our warehouse office space and onboarding processes. Eleanor oversaw the search for new headquarters, eventually securing a renovated textile mill in Portland's Pearl District, a symbolically perfect location given our mission. The cavernous space with its preserved industrial elements and modern amenities reflected ThreadCycle's blend of heritage craftsmanship and technological innovation. Moving day coincided with our 6-month post-acquisition milestone. As I watched employees from both original companies working side by side to arrange furniture and set up workstations, I felt genuine optimism about our integration. The visible, Divide from that first joint meeting had gradually dissolved, replaced by new alliances formed around shared projects and complementary skills. Olivia found me surveying the scene from a mezzanine overlooking the main floor. "It's really coming together," she observed, gesturing toward the bustling activity below. "The office or the company?" I asked. "Both," she replied with a rare smile. "Though we're not fully there yet." Her candor was refreshing. Over the past months, our professional relationship had developed an unexpected directness. She no longer felt the need to impress me, and I no longer felt intimidated by her. We had established a working dynamic based on mutual respect, if not quite warmth. "The supply chain verification protocol is still a sticking point," she continued. "My team thinks the process is too cumbersome for smaller designers. They're right, Jamie. We're losing potential partners because of the compliance burden." It was a recurring point of contention, the balance between ThreadCycle's rigorous standards and Green Thread's emphasis on accessibility. I understood both perspectives. "Let's form a task force," I suggested. 3 people from each original team, with a mandate to streamline the process without compromising our standards. "You lead it." She raised an eyebrow. "You trust me to lead that?" "I trust you to find the right balance," I clarified. "You understand both the importance of verification and the designer experience better than anyone else here." The assignment wasn't merely a professional courtesy. Olivia genuinely excelled at identifying unnecessary friction in our processes, approaching problems with a pragmatism I sometimes lacked when principles were involved. Her task force delivered results within 3 weeks, a redesigned verification protocol that maintained rigorous standards while reducing the administrative burden on designers by nearly 60%. It was innovative work, combining blockchain verification of key certifications with more user-friendly submission interfaces. "This is excellent," I told her during our review meeting. "We should implement it immediately." She accepted the praise with characteristic poise, but I detected a hint of genuine pleasure at the acknowledgement. The team worked incredibly hard. They'll be thrilled to see it launched. I studied her across the conference table, struck by how our professional relationship had evolved. "You're good at this, Olivia. Really good. The head of marketplace strategy role suits you better than I expected." "Better than you expected or better than I expected?" she asked with surprising self-awareness. "Both, probably," I admitted. She nodded, acknowledging the truth in this. Being CEO was never actually my strength. I'm better at solving specific problems than steering the entire ship. The admission must have cost her pride, but she delivered it without bitterness. This was new territory for us, professional self-reflection without the baggage of sibling rivalry. "For what it's worth," she continued after a pause, "you're a better CEO than I would have been for this company. ThreadCycle needed your particular vision." The compliment meant more coming from her than it would have from almost anyone else. I accepted it with a simple "thank you," unwilling to dilute the moment with unnecessary words. Our working relationship continued to strengthen, evolving into something resembling a partnership, albeit one with clear boundaries. She respected my authority as CEO, while I increasingly valued her input on strategic decisions. 6 months after. Moving into our new headquarters, opportunity arrived in an unexpected form. An industry contact tipped me off that Luster, one of the largest fast fashion manufacturers in Asia, was facing mounting pressure from retail partners to improve their sustainability practices. "They're looking for a technological solution to implement quickly," my contact explained, "something they can announce to shareholders before their next quarterly report." Fast fashion represented everything ThreadCycle opposed: disposable clothing produced under questionable labor conditions with minimal environmental standards. Working with Luster would be controversial within our team, potentially undermining our credibility with the sustainable fashion community. Yet the opportunity, To influence a major industry player couldn't be dismissed outright. If Luster implemented even a portion of our verification protocols across their massive supply chain, the environmental impact would far exceed what ThreadCycle could achieve alone with smaller partners. I brought the dilemma to our leadership team, expecting divided opinions. Eleanor and May were immediately skeptical. "They'll use us for greenwashing," May warned. "Implement just enough of our system to claim sustainability credentials without making substantive changes." Eleanor nodded agreement. "Our brand is built on authentic sustainability. Associating with Luster risks everything we've built." Devon saw it differently. "If our technology can make even a modest improvement in their practices, the scale of potential impact is enormous. 1% improvement across Luster's production is equivalent to 100% improvement across all our current partners combined." The debate continued without resolution, until Olivia, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. "What if we approach this differently?" she suggested. "Instead of licensing our full system to Luster, we create a specialized implementation focused specifically on water usage and textile waste, their two most problematic areas." Effective. From Olivia, this qualified praise was high commendation. My father raised his glass. "To ThreadCycle's continued success, then, and to my daughter's collaboration, which none of us could have predicted a year ago." We clinked glasses, the moment feeling genuinely celebratory rather than performative. Later, as Olivia and I helped clear dishes, she nudged me gently with her elbow, a casual gesture of camaraderie that would have been unthinkable months earlier. "We did it," she said quietly. "Created something viable from a complicated beginning." "The company or our working relationship?" I asked, echoing our conversation from the office move. "Both," she replied with a small smile, though I'm still getting used to reporting to my little sister. The acknowledgement carried no bitterness, just a wry recognition of our transformed dynamic. I returned her smile, appreciating how far we'd traveled from that painful family dinner, where she had announced GreenThread with such calculated triumph. The following week brought ThreadCycle's biggest milestone yet. Vogue published a feature on Fashion Sustainability Revolutionaries, with ThreadCycle prominently profiled as the industry's most promising structural solution. The article described our unique vertically integrated approach, highlighting how the combination of technological innovation and supply chain verification was creating new possibilities for ethical production at scale. What began as a marketplace connecting conscious consumers with sustainable designers has evolved into something far more revolutionary, the writer observed. ThreadCycle is reimagining the entire production ecosystem, from raw materials to finished garments. The piece included photos of our headquarters, interviews with partner designers, and a sidebar specifically on the Luster implementation, noting early data showing a 17% reduction in water usage across their pilot facilities. Most significantly, the article featured a photograph of the leadership team, with Olivia and me standing side by side. The caption identified her as Olivia Chen, co-founder of GreenThread and head of marketplace strategy, exactly as she had requested in our acquisition agreement. We gathered the entire company to celebrate the coverage, champagne flowing freely as employees from all departments mingled in our communal kitchen space. I watched with quiet satisfaction as former ThreadCycle and GreenThread team members celebrated together, the original divisions now largely invisible to newcomers. Thomas Harrington called to offer congratulations. "You've exceeded our expectations," he said, his typically reserved tone warmed by genuine approval. "The board is prepared to discuss expansion funding whenever you're ready." After the celebration wound down, I found myself alone in my office, reflecting on the journey that had brought ThreadCycle to this point. The Vogue article was displayed on my computer screen, the team photograph capturing a moment of professional triumph I couldn't have imagined when Olivia had announced GreenThread at that painful family dinner. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts, Olivia entered, carrying 2 remaining glasses of champagne. She handed one to me before settling into a chair. "Quite a day," she observed, gesturing toward the article. "Vogue is the pinnacle for fashion coverage." I nodded, accepting the glass. "It validates our integrated approach. We couldn't have achieved this as separate companies." "No," she agreed, surprising me with her candor. "GreenThread would have failed without ThreadCycle's infrastructure, focus. And ThreadCycle would have taken years longer to reach consumers without GreenThread's marketplace." We sipped our champagne in companionable silence, both reflecting on the unlikely path that had brought us here. "I never thanked you properly," she said finally. "For the acquisition, you could have let GreenThread fail." "That wouldn't have served anyone," I replied, echoing what I'd told her when she'd joined ThreadCycle. "Not the mission, not the team, and not you." She studied me with genuine curiosity. "How did you become so strategic about separating business from personal feelings?" "I'm not sure I could have done the same in your position." The question deserved an honest answer. "When you announced GreenThread at that dinner, using my concept without acknowledgement, I had a choice to make. I could define myself by that betrayal, or I could use it as fuel to build something better." I shrugged lightly. I chose the latter. Every decision since then has flowed from that initial choice. Olivia absorbed this, nodding slowly. "You know, I've spent most of my life assuming I understood you, the quiet sister, the one who needed more time to find her path. I was completely wrong." "We were both wrong about each other," I acknowledged. "Maybe that's what made working together possible, eventually. We had to discard our preconceptions." "2 misconceptions corrected," she offered, raising her glass. I clinked mine against hers, appreciating the symmetry of the moment. 2 sisters who had begun as rivals, now celebrating shared success. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Jamie, I'm glad it turned out this way. Not just professionally, but personally. Working with you, for you, has been unexpectedly enlightening." The admission clearly cost her some pride, making it all the more meaningful. "It's been enlightening for me, too," I replied simply. After she left, I returned to the Vogue article, studying the team photo with new eyes. There we stood, Olivia Chen and Jamie Chen, our professional relationship now founded on mutual respect rather than competition. The caption identified us by our respective titles, but what remained unwritten was the more personal transformation. Sisters who had found a way forward after betrayal, colleagues who had built something meaningful from complicated beginnings. ThreadCycle continued to evolve in the months that followed, securing additional funding, expanding our manufacturer network, and developing new verification technologies. The journey ahead would bring fresh challenges, new opportunities, and, undoubtedly, some setbacks. But the foundation was solid, a company built on innovation, integrity, and the unexpected strength that comes from turning pain into purpose. As for Olivia and me, our relationship would always carry the complexities of our shared history. The sister who had once stolen my business idea and mocked me at a family dinner now reported to me as a valued executive in the company where I served as majority shareholder. Life had a poetic justice all its own, one that required no vengeance or vindication on my part. The true victory wasn't in the reversed power dynamic or even in ThreadCycle's market success. It was in the person I had become through the journey, someone defined not by family expectations or sibling rivalry, but by my own vision, values, and capacity for leadership. That transformation was the legacy that would outlast any business, achievement, any industry recognition, any financial success. It was the story behind the story, the silent revolution that had occurred while I was busy building a company. And it was mine, regardless of what came next. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. We set concrete benchmarks they must hit before they can publicly associate with the Thread Cycle name. Her proposal was brilliant in its pragmatism, offering Luster a path to improvement without compromising our standards or enabling superficial greenwashing. We'd need contractual protections, I noted, already seeing the potential, and complete transparency on the results. Olivia nodded. Absolutely. We control the narrative completely. They don't get to claim Thread Cycle certification without meeting specific, measurable criteria. The leadership team gradually warmed to the modified approach. We developed a specialized program called Thread Cycle Transitions, specifically for mainstream manufacturers beginning their sustainability journey, with graduated verification levels they would need to earn through documented improvements. Luster's executives flew to Portland for negotiations. I insisted Olivia join me for the meetings, recognizing her skill at balancing idealism with practical business considerations. Together, we structured a deal that maintained Thread Cycle's integrity while offering Luster a viable path toward better practices. The morning we announced the Luster partnership, I braced for backlash from the sustainable fashion community. Instead, the response was surprisingly nuanced. While some purists criticized our involvement with fast fashion, most environmental advocates recognized the strategic value of influencing major industry players rather than merely condemning them. "This is how real change happens," wrote one prominent sustainability blogger. "Not by preaching to the converted, but by creating accountability mechanisms within mainstream production." The Luster contract transformed Thread Cycle's financial projections, providing stable recurring revenue that allowed us to continue supporting smaller, more innovative designers. More importantly, it positioned us not merely as a niche player in sustainable fashion, but as a change agent for the broader industry. As Thread Cycle approached its first anniversary as a combined entity, we faced a new challenge: managing our rapid growth without losing the mission-driven culture that defined us. The company now employed over 100 people across 3 departments: technology, supply chain verification, and marketplace operations. Many newer employees had joined because of our growing industry reputation rather than personal commitment to sustainability. While this brought valuable diverse perspectives, it also risked diluting our core purpose. I worked with HR to develop a comprehensive onboarding program focused on Thread Cycle's environmental mission, including field trips to both sustainable textile producers and clothing waste processing facilities. My own schedule had become increasingly consumed by external relationships: investors, manufacturing partners, industry associations. Eleanor effectively ran daily operations, while Olivia managed designer relationships and marketplace strategy. The leadership team functioned smoothly, but I sometimes missed the hands-on involvement of our early days. One Tuesday morning, my assistant interrupted a conference call with an unusual request. "Your father is here. He says it's important." I wrapped up the call quickly and found my father waiting in the visitor area, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Since beginning his consulting role with Thread Cycle, he had always scheduled appointments well in advance, respecting the boundaries we'd established. "Dad, is everything okay?" I asked, leading him into my office. "Everything's fine," he assured, me settling into a chair. "I just needed to speak with you about something personal." I waited, giving him space to gather his thoughts. "Your mother and I have been talking," he began carefully, "about investments." This was unexpected. My parents had always maintained conservative investment strategies, focusing on retirement security rather than entrepreneurial ventures. "We'd like to invest in Thread Cycle's next funding round," he continued. "Personally, not through any fund or group. We've set aside $1 million. I stared at him, processing the implications. My parents had supported my sister's ventures enthusiastically from the beginning, attending launches, making introductions, investing emotionally and socially, if not financially. Their support for Thread Cycle had developed more gradually, initially, through my father's consulting role. That's significant, I said finally. Why now? He smiled slightly. 2 reasons. First, it's a sound investment decision. Thread Cycle's model is innovative, its leadership is strong, and its growth trajectory is impressive. He paused, his expression softening. Second, it's our way of acknowledging that we didn't recognize your potential early enough. We want to demonstrate our belief in you, Jamie, even if it's later than it should have been. The acknowledgement touched me deeply, addressing wounds I hadn't realized were still tender. I appreciate that, Dad. But I need to consider potential conflicts. Given your consulting role, he nodded, unsurprised by my professional caution. I've prepared documentation addressing those concerns. The investment would be passive, with no additional governance rights or operational involvement. Of course, he had thought this through. Thoroughly. He was still Robert Chen, meticulous attorney, even in this more personal context. I'll review everything with our board, I promised. But speaking just as your daughter, not as Thread Cycle's CEO, thank you. This means a lot. His expression relaxed into genuine warmth. You've built something remarkable here, Jamie. Something that matters. Your mother and I are very proud. After he left, I sat quietly, absorbing the interaction. My parents' investment offer represented more than capital. It symbolized a fundamental shift in how they perceived me, not as Olivia's less accomplished sister, but as a successful entrepreneur in my own right. I shared the news with Olivia during our weekly meeting, unsure how she would react. That's wonderful, she said, her response appearing genuinely positive. They should invest. Thread Cycle is a solid opportunity. You're not upset? I asked, surprised by her equanimity. She considered the question carefully. A year ago, I would have been furious. It would have felt like they were choosing you over me. She shrugged, a gesture that conveyed how much had changed. Now it just seems like a rational decision. Thread Cycle is thriving. I'm part of that success, even if not in the role I originally envisioned. Her perspective revealed how far we'd both come. Olivia finding security beyond family validation. Me recognizing that past dynamics no longer defined our relationship. We should tell them together, I suggested impulsively. Over dinner this weekend. It's been months since we've both been home at the same time. She agreed, and that Sunday found us at our parents' Lake Oswego home, seated around the familiar dining table where our rivalry had played out over countless meals. The atmosphere felt different now, lighter, less charged with unspoken competition. My mother noticed it immediately. You two seem more comfortable together, she observed, passing a platter of roasted vegetables. Work must be going well. Olivia and I exchanged glances, sharing a private moment of amusement at the understatement. The integration has been successful, Olivia confirmed diplomatically. Jamie's leadership has been,